Hi everyone. I just wanted to start by saying thank you to Bee Farmers of Ontario for having me. Yeah, my name is Kristine Tapley, and actually my off-farm job is working with Ducks Unlimited Canada, and so I do get to speak fairly often within industry, but never about my own farm. And so I'm excited to share some of the stuff we've been up to at home, and can't wait to hear some of your questions at the end. Um, so this is my family, my husband Graham and two kids. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we started Old Shore Cattle Company. And I know your day today is all about regenerative agriculture, and so I kind of battled with that to start with, because I don't think that initially I didn't think that a lot of the practices that we did specifically fit into those foundations. But the more I thought about it, I do believe that we do, and I think that probably a lot of us are that way. If we look at Regen Ag and those principles about connecting to nature and improving land and things like that, kind of that's what we do. That's in our business, and so I am happy to share what we have done at home along those lines. So to start with, how we started, where we came from. I came from cattle, so I grew up on a cow-calf operation here in Manitoba. But this here is my husband Graham, and he grew up actually in Winnipeg, in the city, and he didn't come from cattle. I met him in university. He was taking an agronomy degree. His grandparents have a grain farm, and it was his dream to take over that grain farm. And so that's why he was in agronomy. But things in that succession plan didn't pan out, and so there we were, both living in Winnipeg and knowing that we needed to get out of the city. So the big plan that we came up with, I guess, was that we would rent some grass and buy some heifers with a stalker loan, and try our hand at cattle, and see if he would be interested in that route to primary agriculture, to try and keep that dream of farming. So that was the big start. I did get greedy and ended up suggesting that we breed those heifers that first year. And so we did that, and it was a bit of a droughty year. Nobody had a lot of extra feed, and as you can imagine, auction mart heifers from two young kids that haven't been in the business for more than 6 months were not really at the top of anybody's wish list. And so we ended up keeping those 75 heifers and calving them out the very first spring we were at it. So Graham's learning curve and mine was pretty steep that first year, and still. But that's kind of how we got into it. And that was back in 2012. And here we are now. A lot has changed since then. And I guess I would say that I just want to shout out to my parents. Although we don't farm with them, we never would be where we are without having had their support. I mean, even from day one, when we came home and gave them our big plan that Graham was going to quit his very good job he actually had in Winnipeg and move out to Gladstone with me and take a job at the local ag inputs retail, driving a water truck. And we were going to get these heifers. They were supportive from day one and really encourage us to go for it. So so that was kind of where we started. But back to the regenerative concept, I guess I thought I'd start with land improvement, because that was probably our first real focus after we got through that first couple of years, got our heads above water. Our first piece of property that we bought had a long way to go when we purchased it. So this is what it looked like, or there was 3 quarters in that pasture, and this is the north half. So You can see the white areas there. This actually was an old gravel pit. And so the gravel's not very deep in this area. Like a couple feet down, there'd be a band of a couple feet of gravel. And so you have to really make quite a big mess to get very much gravel out of there. So they'd done this for, I'm told, about 25 years that they took gravel out of here. In the meantime, they also grazed it, continuously grazed it. I would say continuously overgrazed it is probably more accurate. And so it was really beat up in a lot of ways when we first purchased it. I think there was about 80 acres here that didn't have any topsoil on it. So this isn't a great picture, my apologies, but this is what it looked like when we moved in. You know, you don't think when you start off a project like this that you should take pictures of what it looked like when it was crappy. You're not excited to take those pictures as you are when it's doing well. So I should have taken more at the beginning, but here you can see that there's these kind of green knolls, and really that's the topsoil. So the topsoil had been scraped off of the land, piled up, and that's where you'd get a little bit of green here and there, and between there's really nothing covering that gravel. Some places would lay water, some places didn't grow anything at all, it was just a gravel pile. So there's a big area that looked like this. And we actually were so fortunate to be able to access a government program that helped us restore or reclaim this abandoned gravel mine. And so they came in with big equipment and leveled off those knolls and were able to spread out the topsoil that was left for us, so we could start kind of with a clean slate. And this was a huge job because in a lot of those cases, because those topsoil piles had been there for so long, there was instances where there's 8-inch poplars growing out of these topsoil piles because they'd been there for so long. So that was a big job, and thankfully they were willing to take it on a little bit piecemeal for us. We did it at about 4 years in a row, and that helped us to kind of bite off a chunk, get that growing something, and move on, so that we weren't out a whole pile of grazing area. Even though there wasn't a lot of grazing there to begin with, at least we could kind of work with them on that. So excuse me. So this is actually a picture of, this is not a parking lot, this is a picture of what the ground looked like even after they did all that leveling for us. And so you can see there's no ground cover. Nothing is protecting this soil. It is pretty fragile because there's just nothing covering it up. So it had been continuously grazed. There's very little diversity there, but full stop, it was cheap. That was what we were in the market for, was cheap. And I feel silly saying that. I know that I'm talking to beef farmers of Ontario here, and our land values here in Manitoba are probably laughable compared to what you guys have to grapple with in Ontario. And so, but even still, I'm sure comparatively it's the same. When you're starting, you need to start somewhere, and that was the most attractive part, was that we could afford it. So how did we get something growing there? It's funny you talk about regen ag and the principles of no-till. Well, we kind of went with that route, and it wasn't because of protecting the soil in any way. It was because we were so scared to put anything into that dirt after they had spent all that time leveling things. We didn't want to pull up any roots or rocks or trees that they had just buried to level there. So we spun as many kinds of seeds and fertilizer as we could on the areas that we could get to with a harrow, and scratched it in on top. And I mean, everything under the sun we threw out there. A lot of it had to do with what we could afford as well. Now I'd probably be a little more creative with what went out there, but I mean, at that point I was sweeping out Dad's bins and barley bin and throwing that in the spinner just to get something growing out there. But we had lots of different grasses, legumes, forbs, all kinds of stuff. And then the areas that either there was no dirt, like at least in those other areas, there was a little bit of black, but in some places it was just gravel, or the areas that we just couldn't get a harrow across and didn't want to leave the seed laying right on top, we tried to bale graze there. So to, again, just figuring out another way to cover up that soil. So of course, cows ate those down and spread that material out, and you can see there wasn't very good bales, which didn't matter too much. We're not worried about them cleaning up. In fact, we are hoping that they, again, just cover that soil to protect it. This is kind of a neat image that Google Earth had caught of us. So after we'd done a pile of bale grazing out there, you can see all the bale packs and different areas. I don't know if you can see my mouse on the screen, but these really bright green areas, that's where we had done some seeding. And so it's neat to see the progression as an aerial, but pretty good coverage that year for bale grazing, just again to cover up that soil. And then we, of course, put a really strong emphasis on fencing, split it up so that we could give it some rest. I think that was a really big part of the poor productivity, other than the gravel pit itself, was just the lack of rest. So we started building fences. You can't be of the mind that you need straight fences in this part of the world, because there are rocks and trees and sloughs, and this poor post bounder that we used to rent, we used to drag it all through all kinds of stuff. So yeah, that's kind of what we were working with when we were building those fences. But this is what we have now. So again, those 3/4 that we started with, the red fences, of course, the red lines are cross fences. A couple of blue ones there. We don't actually have permanent fence there yet. We just use temporary, or would like to build those fences still. But you can see we split it up quite a bit. Since the beginning, there was none of those. So this is that first spring. So where I was pulling the harrows there, this is what that first catch looked like. So we were so lucky to have good moisture that first year that we tried to do this. You can see all Dad's barley there. Yeah, so it came on really well. We got a pretty good mix in a lot of different areas of the pasture. Here you can see lots of sweet clover, so of course it's no longer there, but just to get that big biomass, lots of material growing so that they could, cows could then punch it down and cover up that soil was our main goal. Just get something growing there, get something to start with, some material to start with, so that we could cover it up and keep the moisture that we did have. Not sure that you can see it very well in this picture, but this is it had just been kind of lower productivity. We didn't seed this area or anything, but it just needed the rest. So as soon as we cross-fenced it, it started to grow. But these darker green areas are bale packs a couple years after. So just that injection of really nitrogen just helped it grow, get some more material, and again, get some cover. It's amazing how quickly the wildlife started to come. Nobody was out there when we first started using this pasture, and then more and more wildlife. It was fun to see. We haven't seen as many movement to the plant native species, just starting to see that now, and I would say 7 years later, starting to see those communities change. So that's kind of an exciting one for me. So yeah, back 2015, that was when we started. You can see all the bulk of sweet clover and alfalfa growing there. again, really, we're just so lucky to have good moisture that first year. I wouldn't guess that it would look quite like that if we tried to do this again. And then this is 2020, standing in pretty much the same spot there. So back again, that's all that clover, which of course is gone. It's just a biannual. But then you can see how it's changed to what's growing there to kind of adapt more to what we had. But I think that it was able to make that transition because we were able to rest it and yeah, give it that rest and keep that moisture in the soil where it needs to be. So what did we do? We covered the ground, we gave it rest. I think at this point we're somewhere between 57 and 95 days of rest, depending on, somewhere between a 3 to 5 day move. And so yeah, a lot more than it used to be, that's for sure. And we tried to start, tried to get more and more paddocks, but also tried to stock it pretty low to start with and just make sure we had a good foundation before we really ramped that up. And then as far as diversity goes, I know, increased diversity, and we've done that on the plants front, trying to grow lots of different things and be cognizant about what we're bringing in with bales, because that's a great way to seed, plant what's in your bale. But I know lots of people would ridicule me for only having one species of animal, one livestock species out there. And that's fair. I will take that criticism, but out here, I'm not interested in running, pigs or sheep or goats or anything else. This is not next to my home. This is 6 or 7 miles away. It's pretty big country, big rock and bush country. There's lots of bear and wolves and coyotes, and my parents are not too far away, and they've had quite a large problem with wolves the last couple of years, actually. So I love lamb, but I'm not going to be putting sheep out there anytime soon. So that takes me from land improvement to adaptability, I would say, is my next real principle that I think is very important. I was thinking about how great improvement we've had on that particular pasture that I was showing you, and how in the last 3 years here, we've had very, very dry weather here in Manitoba. And we didn't really skip a beat in that pasture I was just showing you because of, I think, the stockpile that we'd saved there, and that thatch layer that kept the moisture we did have and let us capture any moisture that did come down. And so we were able to take that kind of in stride so far. But other places, so it's been dry for 3 years, and the rest of the pastures that we've been using, we started about 3 years ago. So we didn't have that extra tank to lean on, and so struggling quite a bit more, making sure we have appropriate stocking it and trying to get those same improvements without the moisture has been certainly more trying. No buffer to work with. But when I think about adaptability, I think my very first place to go is through health and nutrition. And we've tried to really, really get, every time we take a step to fine tune that, I think the better. And so when I talk, what my connection to adaptability there, I guess, is, so we don't have a large land base. We don't make a lot of our own feed. We have to buy a lot of it just because we don't have access. I mean, you saw the kind of land that we're buying. The stuff that you can actually grow a crop on is very expensive. So in my terms, is very expensive. So so we're always getting a mix mash of feed coming in, and it's something that I take on very personally, is figuring out those rations. And so working out what we have, doing all those feed tests, putting them into cow bites. And then I use this spreadsheet to help me kind of figure out inventory. So I've got a list of what all I have, their weights, how many of each bale. And then as I populate this table beside, it tells me what I've used and how many I have left over. So I'll build rations for cows, like the main cow herd in their second trimester, the first and second calf heifers, and anything that's considered, I would call skinny. So coming at a preg check, if anything got like a 2, I would put them into in with the heifers. And so they'll get a different ration, usually based on a bred heifer requirements. So then I'll build rations for, cull cows and backgrounding calves and different weights and the yearling bulls and the herd bulls. And so everybody gets a specific ration, and then I try and go in and update and make sure that we are using what I say we're using. And so this is my best, way so far of tracking that kind of stuff. But I really do think, it doesn't sound, it's not very difficult. There's nothing real high tech about it, but even just going through that exercise. So for example, we were feeding our calves at home here this year, and I had planned on feeding them some bale silage, some baleage that we had in corn. It worked out pretty good in their ration, and I was happy with that because everybody else, the main cow herd and the heifers, they're out, back in the bush, and it'd be a lot harder to feed them baleage because you'd have to, feed it out every day or every other day. But in messing around on cow bites, I realized that if I switched out that baleage for just a plain alfalfa grass hay, I could, using the same amount of feed, I could up my calf gain by 1 pound a day. Well, even if it is a little more messing around and some more fuel out of the tractor, if I can average an extra pound a day on every calf on the place, it's probably worth it to figure out how to feed the cows that baleage instead. So, stuff like that, it saves you a lot of money just having to go through that exercise. This is a funny one. It's a very simple, cheap tool. I think we paid $2,000 for this little grain cart. This was the first day we bought it, so we've made some changes to it, certainly. So we don't have that big auger on it anymore. But this little grain cart is so helpful. It's a very important tool for how we're able to manage things. So this gives us the ability to take supplement to wherever cows are. So if cows are still on pasture, and if grass starts to dry off in July and they're starting to go backwards, we can go out there and start supplementing them. If we wanted to leave the calves on for a little longer in the fall, and we're worried about keeping cows in shape or getting those calves, do a little preconditioning before weaning, getting them onto this to some sort of supplement, we can do that. Maybe we haven't got down to where we do the fence line wean in our rotation yet, and so we can start supplementing in that way. Maybe it's 40 below for a couple of weeks because we're in Manitoba and the ration that I built for minus 25 isn't cutting it, so we got to come out and give them a little extra, and they're not at home. This is just an amazing, helpful, cheap, worth way more than it costs tool for sure. Another thing in terms of adaptability, or lets us be adaptable, I would say, is a scale. Again, worth more than it costs for sure. Having a scale and being able to know weights of all classes of animals has helped us feed our calves better. helps us monitor gains. So sure, I go through all the work of building those rations and cow bites and doing those inventories, but is that actually what they're gaining? We didn't know that until we started to weigh calves periodically through the winter. Helps us market our animals more accurately. So whether it's putting together a load of cull cows or selling bred heifers or replacement heifers, we can tell you what they weigh. We're not just guessing, and that has helped tremendously. It also helps us feel more confident about selling on a platform like Team. So we try not to sell in the auction mart anymore. It just makes so much sense to do the online auctions. They come out and video your cattle. Those cattle don't have to leave the farm. You don't have near the shrink. There's no stress. You're not worried about them getting sick by the time they get to the feedlot's door. I think that you're delivering a healthier product. This is really, and you've actually done some weighing. So weighed a batch of cattle and then took them to the mart and looked at what those sales slips weighed versus weigh them, and then what's the pay weight that we get from somewhere like Teams. And we're saving thousands of dollars by selling on Team. So I don't think we won't change from that anytime soon, and it really is because of that scale. Yeah, more about adaptability. I think nothing speaks to this more than we've been calving for only 8 years now, but 6 years we've been at a different place. And so when I mean different place, I mean like different quarter section, not on the same yard, calving. So yeah, so have to be portable. Corrals, panels, maternity pens, chutes, all have to be portable because we just had never had a spot until now. 2 years now we've had a home quarter. So until then we had been renting a house in town and driving about a half hour out to cows. And so in calving season, we'd park my parents' RV out on calving grounds, and at that time we were all calving together, my brother, my parents, and ourselves, just to try and get the labor. So somebody would stay over in the camper and do late and early checks, and we would come after work or go before work or all the rest of it, trying to make that work while we all had off-farm jobs. So although I do enjoy cow camp, I am also happy to be past that and be able to just go in the house for a coffee if I want. Yeah, so beyond land improvement and making sure that your business is adaptable, that takes me to continuous improvement and diversifying. So Graham and I took a holistic management course, like lots of people have. And one of the things they talked about there was 3 ways to improve your business. And first was energy capture. So thinking about solar panels on your farm. How well are you collecting sun energy? So how much are you growing? What's the grass look like? And then product conversion. So how are your cows doing at taking that grass and turning it into pounds? And thirdly, the other way you can make money is by taking those pounds and marketing them. And so we tried to really take that and methodically go through those 3 things in that order. So first, grass management. Obviously, I showed you lots of slides on how we tried to accomplish that to begin with. Second was genetics and herd health. Because remember, we started with auction mart black heifers, and so we had a long way to go there too. And then next, I think on the list is, this is where we're just moving into now, is thinking about how to continue to grow and how to maybe look at different ways of marketing. So yeah, so this was actually, dug this up, this was some of those first black heifers that we bought back in 2012. And so I think I even used this picture in my bred heifer ad that nobody wanted. Anyway, so this first year we had bred them black Angus, and once we realized we were going to be in it and that's what we wanted to do, then we started bringing them horned Hereford. Don't ask me why horned. I'm not sure what we were thinking, but to get the baldies, and we really wanted to try and improve by some heterosis. So that, I think that made sense for the first kind of step. And then from there, we're trying to grow a little faster. And so we started to try and source F1 crosses. So get somebody else that was creating those Hereford Angus cross for us. And we did that for a few years. We were buying 60 heifers every year to try and grow a little bit more rapidly. And again, we would take out a stalker loan, buy 60 baldies, breed them. Anything that got open, we would, or any of the opens, we would then sell at the end of the stalker contract, put that against the loan, and then the rest would roll over into a breeder co-op program. So that worked really well for us for the beginning, and I'd say that's still obviously the foundation of our herd. This picture's only in 2017, so a lot of those cows are still around, obviously. But we were starting to realize that even though we were choosing heifers from ranches that we thought had a very similar management system and ranches that we were trying to emulate, it was still our home-raised heifers that performed the best, right? And so we started to really think about, oh man, how can we still grow but do it from home rather than trying to buy somebody else's heifers and adapt them to our environment. And so we were really lucky to kind of have this fall into our lap. Don and Diane Guilford are a couple that are Hereford breeders here in Manitoba, but they also had a black Angus herd as well. They were interested in slowing down a little bit. They didn't want to keep those black Angus cows, but they also they wanted to maintain an interest in them. They had a market for the bulls, and they were excited about that group of cattle, and so thought that they would look for somebody to work at it with them. And so we ended up leasing these cows from them and do a calf crop share with the Guilfords. And we are so lucky to have had that opportunity because they're incredible mentors. We have learned so much from them and from their cattle, and this has been a really great opportunity for us, not only for that mentorship and being able to ask questions and learn from them, but also it's been a way to inject really high quality replacement heifers into our herd, which we can take then and create our own F1s at home that we know are suited to our environment and our program. So we can have those pure black heifers. We can create Angus Hereford cross heifers. We will get some half Angus quarter Herefords that we'll end up keeping and breeding back Hereford out of this program too. So it's really kind of given us some more options as far as retaining quality females. Yeah, so then that kind of takes me into the diversity of markets. So something that we've thought more and more about as we've gone through this. is how to value add. And I think everybody has been there, everybody's thought about this, but you know, so we can sell our weaned calves, we can sell, now we have a yard finally, so we can sell background calves. We now are working with the Guilfords, and so we have purebred 2-year-old bulls for sale. We have, because we're taking those Hereford Angus cross cows and breeding them Simmental, those females are often the biggest in the pen, but they don't fit into our program because we're interested in taking the F1 crosses and breeding them to Simmentals. So the 3-way cross doesn't fit our goals. But a lot of people have been looking at those and saying those are nice heifers. They have that maternal Angus Hereford in there, but also some extra production through the Simmental, and their interest in those as moms. And so that's been a market that's opened up for us. Cull cows. So typically we're just selling our cull cows. But recently, a friend of ours who sells pork in farmers markets and to restaurants in Winnipeg was interested in getting into burger. And so we ended up started just killing a couple of cows for him, and then couldn't keep up to the demand. And essentially, you know, especially with the timing when we want to sell our cull cows in, you know, now, cull cow market is not usually very good. And so if we take those fat cows and grind them and sell them to him out of the freezer, we're almost doubling her value, almost doubling the cull cow value that we've brought in. Now, given we are not the ones peddling that burger, so this is a pretty good deal for me. I'm not super interested in just selling burger, but you know, then I'm a hypocrite because the next thing on my list is fat steers. So thinking about, again, selling on team, where I want a nice tight package. And so of course, there's always going to be a few calves on the top end that are too big for the package, and a few, you know, dinks that are on the bottom that don't fit the package. So those bigger calves on the top end, typically I load them up and take them into the auction mart and sell them that way. But maybe I should be keeping those animals around and feeding them out and selling them as fat steers, or selling them out of the freezer to either my friend or to people who want to buy meat. It's just now that we have the 2-year-old bull program, we would have a pasture to put those steers in. And so anyway, so just thinking about these different things. I mean, a lot of people would look at this list and say, oh, you got too many irons in the fire. But if you look at them, they are all just byproducts of the core cow-calf business that we have. We're not really adding anything in there. We're just thinking about other ways to sell it, which I'm sure a lot of people do as well. We're just coming around to the idea now. Yeah, and so then finally, I guess the continuous improvement that I wanted to talk about, what's next. You know, what's so frustrating as a young farmer is that I can't grow to what I want to be all at once. It takes time. And so we haven't been at it for that long, but long enough to know that we want to be further. And so we've had lots of setbacks, and I don't say that, I know that we're early on in our career and we have not seen the hardship that most people have in this industry. But even still, when you're starting out in things like real bad prig checks or scours outbreaks or drought that we've seen in the last few years have really set us back as far as meeting the goals that we were setting. And so moving forward, the things I think that we're going to try and focus on are continually better gains on our calves now that we are in our only second or third year backgrounding them ourselves. would love to have some land that we can actually grow a crop on, and have a little bit more control, or opportunity to grow our own feed, would be huge. Having the land base again to grass our own calves. So we've made the step to backgrounding, which has been really good for us, but we'd love to then carry them through and grass them as well. I mentioned already expanding into the meat market. It's an interesting COVID world out there, and we get lots of questions already about, do we have meat, and what does that look like? So I'm not ready for that, but maybe soon. And finally, the financial management, I think, is our next step. So we already try and do this a fair bit, but honing in on what our numbers are and trying to pay more and more attention to how to improve our business and how to grow without being too risky, I think is really important to us moving forward. And so, yeah, with that, I just want to thank everybody. I think that, like I said, I was excited to talk about my own place, but there's nothing earth-shattering here. And I know that what we're doing is not necessarily going to fit anybody else's operation, but still it's fun to get to share it, and I would love to have some questions and even stories from you folks to tell me what you do on your place. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Kristine, for that great video and sharing your story and what you've done. And we're definitely happy you could join with us today. And we've got a few questions that are coming up here, so we'll get started. So the first one that started up was, can you touch on briefly how you get water to your paddocks and your pastures?
Sure. Yeah. So it depends on the pasture. That one that I showed the aerial of, we had built a fairly big dugout and put a winter watering system in there so that we could winter cattle up there, and then have alley. It's in kind of the center of the section, and so certainly the whole half uses it. On the east quarter, we just use a dugout so far. We don't have an off, an exclusion fence there. It's really good ground. It's a gravel pit, so it's they can get in and out of that dugout really well. But for the majority of the pasture, the fence is excluded, and they just have to walk back to it. A new pasture that we're on now, actually one of our biggest issues is water because of where it's located. Cattle aren't using the grass very well because they're just hanging out at the water. So that's hopefully on the docket for this summer, is to put in a solar water system. They will never winter there because it's rented pasture. But the hope is to use a gravity fed system, so lay pipe on top of the ground. And again, we won't bury it because we won't use it in the winter, but to put storage tanks up on a bit of a raised hill, and then we just have to pump up, fill those tanks, and then they'll gravity feed out to troughs, and attach a trough at different paddocks, put a spigot in wherever we want. So that's the next plan, but usually it's just alleys back to a central off-stream water system.
Okay. And I think this will be a good question for a lot of people, a lot of young and new producers here. What is something you wish you knew when you started on this journey?
A lot of things. That's a good question. I think maybe to actually listen to what you learn rather than having to learn it yourself. I think a lot of the mistakes that I made, I already knew were mistakes, but there's something about experience that really makes you learn it. But yeah, I think maybe it's to have a good, the more I plan, the more successful I think we've been. So to just really make sure, I mean, obviously that plan is always going to change, but I think we maybe would have been a little more aggressive at the beginning had we been more confident in our plan. And that's hard to say too, because I think, again, a lot of that comes with your experience, the more comfortable you are. So I'm not sure I answered that. I'm sorry.
Along with that, I'd just like to say there's no shame in admitting that you went for something cheap, because I think a lot of people in Ontario, especially the young and newer farmers, understand when you just see a farm that's cheap, you're just probably going to go for it. Did the bale grazing
Yeah, you
build?
can always, don't try it.
Yeah, that's right. Did the bale grazing build soil on the gravel, and what seed and fertilizer did you use?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm not a soil scientist, so I won't hazard to say whether it's soil or not. But we definitely added a lot of thatch layer quickly by putting those bales out there. And I think that that is, you know, at least the beginning of what soil could be. And for me, it was mostly the water retention. You know, you just lose so much by evaporation, and very difficult to keep something growing or get that regrowth after grazing if you don't have that material on the ground. And so, yeah, I mean, now when you go out, when you dig a hole, it's not like beautiful black and rich soil, but you could dig a hole. So that's certainly a benefit from what we had before. And then as far as what we use for fertilizer on the seeded area, is that what the question was?
Yeah, what seed and fertilizer did you use? So I'm guessing they mean on the gravel area.
Yeah, so I don't remember specifically, and I'm not sure if I ever wrote it down. But again, my husband's an agronomist, so he could tell me what to put out for fertilizer, which was very helpful. But we, you know, given that there was really nothing there, we didn't hold back on that first year. So we weren't chintzy with, you know, like making sure that that first year grew. Because we just wanted to build that biomass. And, you know, we certainly haven't used any fertilizer since, and I don't plan on using any fertilizer in the future, because I think we can get a lot of that from feeding or grazing well. But we definitely made sure that we were at, you know, the upper end of what recommendations would be the first year. And then for seed, I mean, again, I don't remember exactly, but there was probably 5 different types of grasses, tried to have warm and cool season, tried to get different legumes. You know, I had a couple of different clovers. There was some vetch, bird's foot trefoil. And I mean, I don't know that these species necessarily apply to the folks that are listening, but I had a really interesting tip from, I can't remember who said this, but they're saying when you're trying to establish, look at what grows in the ditch, because that's what's going to catch, and you really just need that basis so that you can progress from there. And so that's really why we went with the sweet clover. And I don't think I'm not even sure if we put the sweet clover in, or if it was a very little amount. But that's, you know, one of the things that really caught and just gave us that material that we could then knock down and cover that soil with. So I don't know if there's value in that or not. But.
All right, well, thanks so much, Kristine. I think we all learned a lot from you, and I know there's some questions here that I wasn't able to get to and answer, but we definitely appreciate it. And just some people were asking for a little bit more of your contact information, maybe to send you an email. And there is a way to see and watch the recordings afterwards. These will be posted to Beef Farmers of Ontario website afterwards, so you will be able to see and hear this again. So don't be afraid to go and watch these afterwards. And again, thanks so much, Kristine. There was a lot there to learn, and I'm sure we could all learn a lot more from you as well. Definitely appreciate it, and look forward to hearing and seeing more of you in the future. I think we'll all be seeing a lot more of you. So thanks again.